Welcome back to the Perfect Lap Podcast. I'm Mark Jager. This is Mark Kilgore. He goes by Kilgore. I go by Jager. Today, we're going to talk about the Global Time Attack Finals recap. So, lucky for me, unlucky for Kilgore, I was actually at the event, and I even get to say, even if it's ever so slightly, just the smallest bit of it, I got to drive at the event. So this is one of the very few events that I've actually driven in Time Attack this year out of my quote-unquote retired status factor. Sadly for Kilgore, there was no live stream this year either, which kind of caught a lot of people by surprise, even myself to some degree. So, Kilgore, how were you following
I had some serious FOMO. I had some serious FOMO, man. I did. Basically, I was just watching like Race Hero, on my phone, just kind of seeing what was going on. Check it, I would check the early sessions, right, because those are generally going to be your fast ones, especially out there in Southern Cal where you've got the good weather and then it heats up quickly throughout the morning and into the afternoon. But, check those early sessions on Race Hero and then kind of check it at the lunchtime, see where the standings were, and then check it at the end of the day, just to kind of see if anybody had jumped up some places. And then, so I basically did that Saturday and Sunday, and I hope that people out there appreciated. Jager and I, really tried to make sure that you guys stayed up to date on what was going on. We tried to kind of push some of that information out there because we know you guys wanted it. Unfortunately, with the live stream being down, it was not easy to really get that information. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was the actual event like? I know you said there was great weather throughout the event, but give me your thoughts. How was it?
Yeah, so we'll start with the weather, right? So in years past, we've had this like fog come in and kill off the first sessions and basically had to wait till the second session to even start the event. And the weather at Buttonwillow can be like, it's Southern California, right? So it can either be kind of hot per se, or it can be really cold, or we can have fog or weird stuff. Essentially, the event started off with like 40s, 50s in the morning and ended in the 70s in the afternoon. So just an overall like great event weather-wise. Wasn't any rain, obviously, anything like that. So weather was fantastic. It did make for... Now, if you were in other places, you'd probably say this is hot. But like at 74 degrees in the afternoon sessions, maybe getting up to like 80-ish. It's not hot. But when you come from SoCal and where Buttonwillow is, where it can get up to 112, 113, that's hot. Obviously, you'd never run your fastest lap time during that, but that's just the thing. So the weather was fantastic. It was on point for everybody to be able to get out there and do what they need to do when they need to do it. I think kind of a big sticking point. I'll kind of jump into the Feras conversation here really quickly. So you got someone like Feras. Buttonwillow, in my opinion, is another one of these tracks that, like, I think every track can obviously benefit from amount of time that you spent on the track. But Buttonwillow has so many little pitfalls that you can fall into during a lap that really make it so if you want to be the fastest out there, you have to get to those little nuances, and to do that, you just have to run this track a lot. So that's probably, for Feras, that's probably one of his biggest hard sticking points. And the fact of, and this is not trying to take anything away from Feras, but when time attack events, when we start off like going to the ridge, right? We go to the ridge for, a year, 2, 3 years. That's 3 years. That's only 3 years of competition that's ever been competed at that track. What was this? Oh, yeah. This was the 20th event held at this racetrack. So when you start talking about there's been 20 years of people running this racetrack and setting lap records, that gives you an idea of how difficult it's going to be to set these lap records and to set overall lap records. So I'm just going to throw it out there, obviously. Feras was the only one to set a record at this event. His record was a 140.191, which was only 5/100ths, almost 6/100ths faster than Sean Kegel's record in his Corvette. So we got two Corvette guys, fighting for it right there. And just to kind of give you an idea again, right? So we got Sean Kegel, who essentially, and I'm going to give you a little share here, so if you're on the YouTube, you can check it out. This is Sean Kegel's Corvette. Obviously, again, a complete badass of a Corvette. This car, from a realistic standpoint, so this is just opportunity for Sean to, improve and excel. So Sean's car is actually exponentially simpler than Feras's, in the sense that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is like a no ABS car. This is a complete no traction control, none of that stuff. And he does make quite a bit less power, being the fact that I believe he's still running a set of Borg-Warner 7163 turbos, unless this thing that says what it says right here in front of me is different. But I think he's in the process of like upping the power and going different routes and so on and so forth, right? So Sean's car, really awesome. He's got a lot more experience. He now lives, I believe, in Bakersfield, so his opportunities to get to Buttonwillow, much easier, much better. I'm just still very saddened by the fact that Sean didn't get this car out to the track and battle it out with Feras on the day of. I think that would have been really cool to watch both these Corvettes go out and rip. But Sean did show up at the event, and obviously he was rooting on his fellow Corvette owner. And more importantly, as soon as he beat Sean's record, Sean was there to congratulate him and root him on, essentially. And essentially right after that say, hey, man, I can't wait to bring my Corvette back out to try to get that record back. Because that's essentially what Time Attack is all about, right? Is
Absolutely.
Going out there and, seeing what record you can break and how you can do it. So by contrast, like we just got done seeing Sean's Corvette. Now we're taking a look here. This is Feras's Corvette at the event. So I do kind of want to point this out because this is a very important thing to understand as well. People have, I think, the rendition of the Feras Qartoumy version 3 in their head because of all the build-up that Feras has been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And because there was no live stream, people didn't get to really see it on the day of. And realistically, this is his, I believe it's version 2.
Right,
which,
V2, yep.
Yeah, and just by looking at both of these Corvettes between Sean's and Feras's, they're actually built in such a similar fashion in terms of the small front, like a smaller front splitter, and the wing that's not like through the moon or, super huge, and a diffuser that's not, completely cut into the body or doing anything wild, right? So from that perspective, I think you could agree, give me your impressions here. They're not, like, these cars don't look existentially like wild Time Attack cars.
No, you're right. Especially for what you would consider in the unlimited category, right? Like, especially if you go back and you look at Feras's V1, the carbon Kevlar Momo branded that I think it may be back here in the States by now. But anyway, the one he actually ran at World Time Attack Challenge. You look at like in comparison as well, Cole Powelson's GTR, right? That has like a triple element wing with these huge front canards, huge front splitter. Feras's V1 car has a bigger wing, bigger aero, and I sort of remember him talking about one reason that he did this V2 was the V1, right? He had started with that car very early on and had sort of, gone from limited, had set various records, and then basically a few years ago, he won limited at COTA. He had the opportunity to get the twin turbo set up, so he did that and then moved to unlimited. And the V1 car had undergone so many changes, right? It had been cut apart, put back together, had issues, right? Like he had done a lot of things with that car that he sort of said, if I had an opportunity to start with a blank slate, there were some things that I would do different, and that opportunity ended up falling in his lap with this particular chassis that he's now using for V2. And one of the things that he mentioned is he would actually go with a little less aero, and I think that that's what you're seeing here in this V2 is that it doesn't have the big crazy aero, and that's similar to Sean's car. I mean, in some ways, I mean the Corvette is already pretty good. It's already pretty slippery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean you can go wild if you want to, but I don't know. I kind of go back to this became especially more apparent to me at Coda, and I know I am about to make a comparison between cars that are completely different, and I understand that, right? I don't want people blowing us up being like this is stupid, but if you look at Coda, right, especially the last couple years, and you get a lot of the GT4 cars that are out there, right, or the GT3 cars, even the GTX, right, the McLaren GTX that we had I think that was from Rafa Racing, right, like those cars are very fast. They run sub 2-minute times, but they don't have crazy aero, right? Like it's you don't always have to have big aero to run fast times, right? Like you have to figure out the balance of the car and the chassis, and you have to have aero to do what you want it to do, but you also have to balance that out with so many other aspects of the car. And from what I remember, I think, and if I'm wrong, forgive me, but my memory is that in some of the YouTube videos that Feras did when he was prepping that new V2 car, he was sort of saying like, I'm actually going a little bit less on the aero because I don't. Yeah, I mean it makes a difference, but I don't really need it.
Yeah,
aero isn't everything.
Yeah, and I'd go into the concept of it's very track dependent, right? You go to a track like Coda, and I think you can get away with having exponentially less aero because of the long straightaways and certain aspects, right? I think at a track like Buttonwillow, which is kind of one of the reasons I really like Buttonwillow, is you can benefit more from having more of a Pikes Peak style aero fashion.
Sure.
And that's very apparent, when you start looking at, some of the other competitors and what history has shown at Buttonwillow in terms of the aero that people have run and what they've been able to accomplish, so on and so forth. So Feras, right? So Feras went out there. He broke a record.
Congratulations to Feras. The only record broken. Thank you, sir.
Now, I will say this. Big negative factor here is I know a lot of people wanted to see him break the overall lap record, which again, I'm going to say it, PZ tuning, right? Will I Young, 137.3, front-wheel drive, Honda Civic, still holding on from 2018. It's going to hold on one more year with that unlimited front-wheel drive and overall unlimited class record. So, Will I Young, all these people can talk all they want, but that record's still holding true, and man, that's a beast of a record. So we'll kind of get into kind of why that happened. One of the other reasons. So I forgot. I'll give Feras a little reprieve on this as well. So big part of talking with Feras during the event, a big problem that kind of he ran into was, if I remember right, which excuse me if I didn't, power steering. He had a power steering issue, a line issue. Power steering fluid all over his tires, kind of ruined his practice day / Saturday tires. So he was trying to just learn the track and go around the track, get some muscle memory going. Tires got ruined, and he ended up having to throw his Sunday tires on well early of what he expected, which really put him into a situation of having to push the car harder earlier than he really anticipated. And that's a huge factor in his ability to lay down the fastest lap possible. So, just one of those things. Most people would say, well, why didn't he bring 2, 3, 4 sets of tires? And again, I'll just say this. So I walk into Ferris's
Why
garage.
don't we all do it?
Yeah, right. But I walk into Ferris's garage spot, and it's just him. He's there by himself. You know, he's got some people he can make some phone calls to and ask some questions to. But again, this isn't a guy that's traveling the country with a semi-truck full of spares. He doesn't have a whole test team of engineers making sure that everything is perfect and working as it should. This is a singular guy coming to an event.
I mean, in 2020, he was in his original Corvette, and that's when he set the limited record that I believe, is that one still stand?
Yeah, still stands.
Yeah, still stands. So from 2020, but then other than that, I don't think he's been back.
No.
Two finals. I mean, two Buttonwillow. So like, I mean, again, like you said earlier, Buttonwillow is definitely a track that takes time. I mean, as any track does, but Buttonwillow definitely falls on the end of the spectrum where the more time you have to be really fast, you have to learn the nuances. Buttonwillow is definitely one of those tracks that has quite a few nuances. I mean, it seems like it never stops turning, right? Like you have you have the long front straight, a couple of other small-ish straightaways, but like it just never stops turning. You have to constantly be setting up. And so for him to even be able to come out, basically have a ruined practice day, even the first day he was having issues, and to come out and, you know, set down a lap on that Sunday is pretty impressive. I mean, no doubt. I mean, he's used to having to do that. So big props to him for that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's hugely difficult, and by him being able to do even what he did, big props to him. And again, he's coming out there by himself. So now let's go into the sad stories of this event. And when I say sad stories of this event, I kind of go into the concept of it's sad because there was two individuals two teams that came out, and they had the ability to, like, we could have had the biggest, most badass three-way push in unlimited class that we could have that we've seen in years. Like, honestly, when I think about it, I go to probably, I look back as far as like 2016 Road Atlanta, when we had a ton of awesome unlimited competitors going against each other. But the Buttonwillow Curse. The Buttonwillow Curse is real, guys. It is absolutely real.
It is.
And
it
David
is.
Hagesma has been on the losing end of this curse 2 years in a row now. So for 2 years in a row, David Hagesma has come out. He has brought his GTR out for finals. He has gone to the practice day, and something bad has happened both years on this practice day. So in this event, right, he came out, and I didn't show up until practice day until really late. And by the time I'd already shown up, I get news, Hagesma's blown his engine. So sadly, I didn't get to see Hagesma at the event at all. Like, I just never actually saw him, I don't believe.
Did he run any sort of representative, not even a representative time, but like where was he at even on the practice day? Did he have like a couple sessions? Do you know? Did you get to talk to him?
No idea
Okay.
on that. So that's kind of another, sad point to it, is like, it's like we don't have any information on where he was. Obviously we know from previous, he ran a 137 and is currently the unlimited all-wheel drive record holder in that GTR with a 137.7. So he was obviously in key contention to take the overall record as a whole, not to mention, break his own record.
Yep.
So yeah, it was tough. That was somebody again that 2 years in a row that I'm really excited to see, really excited to, see what he can accomplish, and just didn't get there. So from the all-wheel drive unlimited class, to rear-wheel drive Unlimited class, another car that a lot of people were really excited to see was the Evasive Motorsports S2000 with Dayu Shihara driving. And again, bad news. They were out doing practice day stuff. And I kind of heard they were doing some like sections. So they were kind of working on sections, right? Where you go out fast in one section, slow down the rest, fast in one section. We do know from Instagram, because it was shared on Instagram, that they ran a 138.9 on the practice day.
Man, that's quick.
It would have won the event if that practice day time was on Saturday or Sunday. That would have won the event.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I hate it for him, but at the same time,
but practice days
that's so frustrating.
Don't count.
That's right.
That's the thing. You got to show up. You got to be there on the actual day of the event. So this goes into that weird methodology of, maybe they had that boost turned up a little too high on the practice day. Maybe they should have saved some of that time. And, from what they were saying, it sounded like that lap time could have been much better. I do know from watching the video on Instagram, you do see that they get held up in the final corner in Sunset by somebody going off. So without a doubt, there was, at least some time extra there that they could have got. But again, if you're not in it on the show day, it doesn't matter. So sad to see that they blew that motor. I know everybody was really excited to see that car. The car's beautiful.
Now, I think that was the car that they were originally planning to take to World Time Attack Challenge, I think.
Yes.
If I'm remembering correctly. Yeah. And then they had some issues with actually getting it there.
Yep.
So, man, that's just so frustrating. You put all that time and energy and effort into it. You work up to World Time Attack Challenge, you can't get out there. So I assume, I don't know. Please correct us if we're wrong, but I don't think that they've really been out to any other sort of competition in that car. So, so I think that this probably would have been the first real big competition for it. And then like something like this happens, and man, it's just like, it's easy for us to say, well, that's just racing. I mean, we've all sort of gone through it, but like it just sucks. And like you said, like the Buttonwillow Curse, man, it strikes again ×2.
Yeah. And
man,
I've been out there when I still remember to this day, they had a Hankook Evo was out there, and I've never seen this car before, and honestly I've never seen it since. But that car went out there, was turning some laps, started dropping some cylinders, and then they took it home practice day again. I mean, I myself have gone out on practice day, blown an engine, and had to go back and rebuild, and then try to come out and blown another motor on the Saturday, or Sunday.
So let's kind of go to a bit of a sideshow here. Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, obviously teams do what they need to do and they make up a testing plan, but from your perspective, things that you did, right, like what should sort of be your mentality in terms of if you're going to go to a practice day or maybe a weekend or two before the actual event, right? Like what should be your goals? And I think there's always a question, right? Like how hard should you push, right? Like, I don't know. Give me some of your thoughts there, and then I'll let you know what I think.
So I have a great scenario for you. So I had wanted to go to COTA in my STI. I won it. I the first year couldn't go. Money the second year, I think, or maybe it was the second year. Whatever, doesn't matter. What matters is, so I was trying to get this STI to COTA, doing everything I possibly could to get there. So I said, you know what? We're going to get this Subaru ready. We're going to get it ready early. We're going to go out and we're going to do testing a month beforehand to make sure we're good to go. And you know what? We went out. We said, test strategy-wise, we're like, we're going to run this thing on low boost alone. We're just going to keep it really calm. We're just going to go out, run some sessions. We went to my home track, Willow Springs. So if anybody understands Willow Springs lap times, right? So I had it on low boost and just was having fun, learning the new sequential transmission, doing 121s, just 121s back to back to back to back, just
barely breaking a sweat.
Barely breaking a sweat, like super easy drive, right?
And that's quick.
Yeah, and it was easy, and the car temps wise, loved it. Like, I think for the boost we were running, I think that only put us in like the 500 horsepower realm, and it was just everything was going great. We're just all having fun. Everything's looking great. Go out for a session, and I did notice, and this is where driver input comes in. I did notice that every time I started coming through 9, the car would hiccup. And it would do this weird hiccup thing. In retrospect, what I learned was that's essentially, at least I believe, that was essentially the car telling me that it was being starved for oil through the the massive corners through there. So I didn't say anything, and I didn't. Well, I eventually said something, but we didn't really diagnose or like worry about it. We looked in the logs. Oh yeah, it looks fine. Whatever. On low boost, a month out from the event that I wanted to go to more than anything, we shot a rod out the side of the block. Man. So with all the planning, all the everything, I then ran into the problem of, can I get a new block built in time to make it to this event?
Yep.
So my advice for anybody is this: test early, test as often as your budget can allow, and always build a spare motor, a spare transmission, and a spare rear diff. And that was my whole program philosophy. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. My program philosophy when I was doing the Subaru was always to have, like, the goal was to have a spare motor, a spare transmission, and a spare diff on hand, ready to go, a spare splitter, like all the things that generally can go wrong in an easy fashion. And when I say a spare transmission, like at the end when I had a sequential, it wasn't have a spare sequential, it was have a spare 6-speed, right?
Yeah, right. It doesn't have to be the same exact spec, right? Like it can be slightly less, or it can be your, like, right, the OEM that came out of it, you know, something like that.
Like the rear diff was just a stock rear diff. And it's like, would it be ideal? Would I be able to run the fastest lap I've ever run on that setup? Well, no, absolutely not. But maybe I'd be able to
still be running.
I'd still be running. Would I may be able to, you know, in a situation like this, if I was evasive and if I was Hagisma, would I be able to maybe go play second in Unlimited, or maybe even still win the event? Maybe.
Yep.
And I know that, you know, in the reality of Time Attack, that's not setting an overall lap record. So some people would say, well, who cares? But I think it's also the experience. And this is going to sound terrible, but it's going to be the experience, right? Like, I will give the team Project Import so much credit because they always come out, and I'll give them a lot of credit, and then I'm going to take away a little bit. So they always come out and they push hard, and they get this car out there, and inherently something goes wrong, and then they try to push through it, they try to work through it, and they'll do everything they can to get this car back out on track. We got to see it happen at COTA, where they had essentially because of essentially poor prep, because they didn't prep with the appropriate gearing, they needed to get a whole new rear diff gear set up so that they could run the car and actually, you know, go down the back straightaway at COTA. Is that optimal? No, it's not. Like this year they showed up, the car looked good, it ran well. Talking to Christian Wong, you know, this was the most amount of laps he'd ever got in the car. They did a 147.0 just off of the podium. Now I know they were the top three were in the 140. Top three were 140, 143, 143. So they were still 4 seconds off essentially, but they got a lot of good data. and they got a lot of information, and they got their driver some time. But again, going back into this, right? It's you have to show up with all the appropriate things, and in my opinion, you should start to treat it like a real deal race team. And that's an interesting. We talking about Feras, right? Feras doesn't show up with enough bodies, enough personnel.
Sure. Yeah.
Where if you needed to do an engine pull, that he would really have that capability to do those things. And that sucks, but it is one of those things where, real deal is this is grassroots racing. So do I expect everybody to be showing up with a spare motor, trans, diff, 3 sets of tires, and a spare splitter in case they go off? No. I got to watch Isaac Torres Jr. They ended up ripping a splitter off, and then they rebuilt it out of wood, and then he broke it again, and then they made another one, and he ripped his rear bumper off. But
Home Depot Racing.
It was, but at the same time, he had Joel out there with him, and they were loving it. I walked in their pits, they're smiling, they're happy, they're enjoying it. Yeah, it's tumultuous, and they're like, I could tell Isaac was a little upset with some of his driving in some places, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, he's gonna go home, and he's gonna go, dude, I killed it at that, in one hand, right? He's gonna be like, I killed it at this event. Because he still ran a 151.1 at the end of the day.
Man.
Like, that's a super fast lap time. He's just off the podium, which I know that he's probably bummed about because I know that he believes that he should be on that top step. And I believe it as well. But what it showed me was him and his team and the heart that they have. The heart that they have to keep pushing through all this adversity. So that told me a lot about that young man and what he is willing and capable to do. And when I see stuff like that, that's when I look down that road and I go, sponsorships, look at this kid. Go take a look at him. He's not just going to go, I blew my splitter off, guys. We're done. Cut it. We're done. He knew that the splitter he was making wasn't going to be as good as the tunneled splitter, that carbon fiber splitter that he had previously. It's not going to be as good as that RS Future splitter. But he said, let's still try. Let's still push. And to me, that means a lot to me from the standpoint of time attack. And that's, I'm not trying to take away anything from, the guys at Evasive, because obviously I know they have the capabilities to fix that car. And I know Hagesma is a resourceful guy. Like, I'm not taking anything away from those guys. But it's just one of those things I love seeing in time attack. I love seeing people try to problem solve and try to get back out there. And in the same garage as Isaac Torres, right? So in the same garage, in a weird way, right? So you still ended up with a thing with Chris Matthews. He only ran a 157. I have higher hopes for him. But again, same type of situation. He ran out there. He was doing his laps. He was overboosting like crazy. His wastegate had a problem. So he had to go find someone that had a wastegate. They were hours away. He had to go meet up with them, get this wastegate, then put the wastegate in. But he never gave up throughout the entirety of the weekend. Right. And not to mention not giving up, he was also, helping Isaac Torres Jr. do the things that he needed to do to go out and go on track and stuff like that. So, not only was he being, a good just overall like team player to other people, but he was also still, putting the effort in for himself. So I love stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But
going back to sort of one pet peeve of mine that I have in terms of practice, we'll call it practice. You should not be showing up to a competition event being like, oh, I need, basically that being the shakedown of a newly built car.
I would agree with you on every level. And then at the same time, I go, I did that so many times, you have no freaking idea.
I know. We've all done it. Like we've all done it because parts don't show up. You do, right? Like, there are realities with money, right? Like
time,
all sorts
money.
of things, time, putting mileage on the car that isn't a competition, right? Like you said, just taking a car out and trying to test it, and then something goes wrong. If it had been a competition, you would at least have a time on the board. I get it. But the thing that just frustrates me is when something does go wrong, you have an unproven car, and now you're causing issues for everyone else in the event. And it's like, dude, like, you should have gotten your crap together earlier, right? Like, I mean, at the same time, you never know when something's going to go wrong. You can have a stock car and have something go wrong. You can have a highly modified car and you have a higher chance of something going wrong, right? Like, it just happens. And I think everybody understands that. And we try and give people, grace in terms of something goes wrong. But I think at the same time, sometimes people get a little bit of a reputation for kind of showing up, and they're like, there's always something going on. So yeah, you should go out. You should at least have some practice time with the car. And I think, as you were sort of saying, I think there's a couple things that you can think about right when you're doing practice. One is it practice for the driver? Is it practice and getting time on the car and making sure things are running right? If it's a new driver, or if it's a driver at a new track, absolutely, right? Like, you don't need the boost turned up. You don't need everything set to, 10 out of 10. You just need to get some laps on the board, right? Like, that's something that happened to me when I was at Gingerman. I kept having boost leak issues. By the third session, where I was still having the same boost leak issue, I was like, I can't pull off track. I've got to just keep lapping around, because so far I have like 4 laps under my belt, right? So like, yeah. I've just got to keep going so that I get an idea of where this track goes. I get an idea of what sort of, okay, I might not be as fast down the straights, but I can at least get an idea of turn-in speeds, mid-corner speeds, and exit, right? Like, just start to get a feel, like, right? So you don't need to turn stuff up all the way if it's a new track. You just need to get some laps in. So take it easy. At the same time, if you've got a new build, you sort of want to ramp up the speed. You don't want to just go out there and go, again, 10 tenths. Like you said, right? Like, make sure things are in check. Especially go out there, run around, pull back in, make sure things aren't rubbing on each other. Make sure, I don't know, that maybe your ride height sensor isn't, hitting your shock compression knob. Who's ever heard of that happening? You guys should ask Jager about it, right? Like, I mean, crazy things happen. And though even some of those things, those are just things that you can go out. You don't have to run super fast. You can just run 70%, 80%, pull it back in, pull the tires off, check things, open the hood, see, right, is there anything that's rubbing? Are we having any issues? And again, not to say that, that those aren't the things. I'm sure both Evasive and, David Hagesma were doing their sort of things, and sometimes stuff happens. That is why we call it the Buttonwillow Curse, right? Yep. You've done everything you can, and you get out there, the car is running perfect. Oh, we're in the best position this year. Everything's going to be great. And then the curse, man, it just descends. It just descends and says, I'm going to pick you. And Hagesma has to feel like, why me? Go find somebody else. Go find somebody else. Why does it have to be me?
So speaking of silly changes and things, so James Ho, we got James Ho, man. So I was with James. We were, a big part of my weekend was working with James, trying to get him to go faster and figure things out. So we were just having a good time. Again, this goes into what the whole conversation we've just been having. And a big part of that is, so last minute, James made the decision, you know what? It'd be a great idea. I'm going to put coilovers on this car right now. And he got them done about 11 o'clock Friday morning. And before the event,
as we all do.
Yeah. So, and this kind of goes into our whole, conversation, and what this led us down the path of, essentially, was we spent all day Saturday trying to figure out why PDK wouldn't go into PDK sport mode, why the car would randomly go into a limp mode, and just trying to figure out what was wrong with the car versus working on driving and working on getting the car set up right.
Yep.
So we really struggled to get this car to do what we wanted it to do because we spent all day Saturday doing that. Once we figured it out, apparently, you're supposed to hook up some random things that fix the active dampening
Sensors,
situation.
electronic things.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's some resistors. There's things you're supposed to plug in and do that he did not do. And then, as Kilgore alluded to, so then we found out that like the rear ride height sensor was rubbing on the compression knob of the coilovers, which literally was sending it back to like zero compression, and it would actively do that as we were going around the track. So that's fun. That just makes the car handle really well. Once we finally got all those things kind of to a place that we could control them per se, we got it going a little bit, and he did finish the event with a pretty solid lap time. I'm pretty happy with it. It is exactly kind of where we were expecting to be, probably about a second off from what we really expected. But James finished it up with a 151.736, which, crazy enough, is 10th place in limited class. But
Gosh.
when I say that's crazy, to some people that's going to be like, what do you mean that's crazy? That's just what it is. But I say that's crazy because I want to talk about the overall lap times of each of these classes, right? So let's start off with Enthusiast. So Enthusiast is supposed to be your entry level, first, get your shot out there type thing, right? And those cars are supposed to be very minorly modded, not anything crazy. And you're talking, you have to be sub 2 minutes. And anybody who remembers Time Attack at Buttonwillow in the last 10 years, when I first started, I mean, if you went sub 2 in street class, you were a driving god. Literally. So to me, it's astronomically wild that we're talking sub 2 in an Enthusiast class car. And just a quick shout out, Stephen Ellis ended up winning Enthusiast class with a 159.5. So again, you have to be sub 2. And a little shout out there. So he was running a set of Vitors, the same Vitors that I've been tooling around with in my Mustang here recently. So there may or may not have been a little conversation with me and Steven about maybe try these because these are pretty good. So
nice.
And
so those are what treadwear are those?
300.
300s. Okay.
Yeah, so they easily fit within the rule book of the 220 Enthusiast class.
Yeah, I feel like generally, and I don't. You can speak to this if you know. People are generally going with either I think there's a 220 of the Goodyear Supercar 3s, not the 3Rs, but there's correct. A Supercar 3. And then there's also, I think, the Michelin Pilot Sport Cups, or Michelin Pilot Sports or something like that that I think that are also sort of around in there. But yeah, so it's you got to remember, Enthusiast is not a 200 treadwear, it is a 220, but there's really not much. There's maybe one or two tires at 220. You're also looking at like 300s. I think there's also like the Continental, whatever it is, the EC something, that are also pretty reasonable, although mostly people run those for like competition rain tires because they're pretty good in the rain. But the GR86, man, we knew we were expecting that one to be up on top, but again, like you said, under the 2 minute barrier is good. Congratulations to him.
Yeah, and a big shout out. Before I go on to the next, I'm just gonna give a huge shout out to Brian Navarra in this Ford Mustang, old school Ford Mustang with a 145.759, and poor Justin Bayless. To kind of recap on the curse, Justin Bayless got a little piece of that curse again. I think he didn't go last year, but I think he went the year before. And again, in this amazing Volkswagen Rabbit that he has, he ran a 203, but highly not representative of what lap time that car can do. I remember now. He was on 3 cylinders instead of 4. So kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Kind of a problem. And it was funny, too, because he was actually pitted right next to us, right near us. And I was watching his car go around the final corner, and I'm like, man, that's slow. Like, I know he has a lot of aero on his car, but I'm just looking at his car like he is not taking off out of this corner, and it sounds strange. And it was, it just 3 cylinders, not running well, just rough. He ended up finding, I think it was a bent valve. So just
That's
rough.
tough. So quick question for you. Me having never been to Buttonwillow, I don't want to spend a bunch of time on it, but I'm just curious. What is the, because Buttonwillow I will consider to be a club track. It's not like a professional level track, but it's a club track. What is the paddock setup there? I know that they have garages, I guess, that some people can rent.
It's pretty rough, to be honest with you, because like,
are you mostly in
super
like
spread out?
Okay,
and then like they have some RV parking stuff, but it's very strange. Like, you just pull up on the side of the road, and then that's your, like, the way they have it, it's kind of like a grid pattern, and you just have little areas with grass in between that you can just pit, but no one pits in the grass. You pit.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Pavement, and then you pit there. I'm not gonna lie, like, it is not optimal at all, and it makes for, like, going to the event not very great either, in terms of being able to walk through. Like, one thing you immediately love about, like, a COTA experience is I can walk through the garages and see all the cars. And in this case, you're, like, kind of stalking around and looking to see, like, who's where. It's just not ideal. Especially after going to COTA, it really puts a lot of emphasis on how it's not ideal. But,
yeah, for sure. Well, that's right. So, Gingerman, CMP, I guess, those are the sort of the other places that have the same sort of vibe of this interconnection of roads with natural landscape, whether that's dirt, grass, sand, whatever, ants between them. That it's like, where do you actually park your car, etc. Versus, and again, I think that I totally understand and appreciate the sanctity of Buttonwillow being sort of the genesis of Time Attack, and just the history of the times that you have there. At the same time, when you show up at Super Lap Battle and you're at COTA, there's just like a whole nother vibe, aura that sort of comes with that level of facility. And it's super cool being able to have all of the spectators, right, like on pit lane, walking up and down, seeing the cars, interacting, right, just sort of two very different things, but accomplishing a common goal of setting the fastest lap time, and that's sort of, that's cool in and of itself, but they do it in very different ways. But anyway,
absolutely.
Getting back to the results.
Yeah, getting into it, like, again, so street class, right? So street class, if you're not sub 50, and I really hate saying it like this, because obviously, like, everybody should show up, and the diversity, right? So we had the winner, 148.348 from Mike Reyes of Boss Racing.
Smoking.
Of course, a Supra. And then you'll love this, a 149.9, very close behind. You had Lawrence and Sky, and they were running a BMW G87 M2. Yep. So, gotta love your BMWs. And then, in third place, a 150.6 from Alex Piquet and William Hang in a BMW M4 from Grassroots Racing.
I mean, look. I look at these results. I see BMWs in the top 5 positions.
Dude, They are. They're all over it.
You could say whatever you want. Supras, I call that a BMW.
So, and one thing I actually got to learn from Robert Robles and his BMW M4, I learned that BMWs are stupid. And I say that because he was telling me about how his BMW M4, that on track, he will hit the brakes, and when he hits the brakes hard, the windows will roll up.
Yep.
It's some
safety.
stupid
It's a safety mechanism. Yeah.
Bull crap thing. And apparently it also has a thing where if he had like a stock seat, the stock seat will like start folding you to get you into a safer position for the crash.
Wow. That's wild.
So, because at one point I see him go down the straightaway and he gets a black flag, and it's for windows. They're telling him to like roll down his windows. So he basically has to
like, what do you want me to do?
Roll down his windows, and then at times when it rolls them up, then he has to roll them back down. And he was telling me,
That's
he's
crazy.
like, it's super inconvenient for obvious reasons and distracting because the air pressure in the car is changing and things are moving up and down. And I immediately just, like, I asked him, I was like, can you delete it? Is there? And he said, well, apparently depending on what options you get of the BMW M4, it won't do it because, if you get like the track-oriented version of competition or something like that,
okay,
it won't do it because it has an expectation you're going to use it at the track. Whereas like this one's just a street-going version, so they don't expect. I'm like, oh my Lord.
Yeah, there are definitely stupid things with BMWs that, although I will at least say this, and I've seen it happen on a couple times. I've seen it happen a couple times on different cars of people being out on track. And all of a sudden, especially if they have like that OnStar or whatever communications, right, where they're
the
like
Chevys and stuff.
They're like, excuse me, are you okay? We see that your car has called us and said that you've been in a crash, and they're like, no, I'm on a racetrack, I'm fine.
They just had that
quit
happen on
calling
Gears
me.
and Gasoline. If you watched that episode,
yeah,
dude.
I've seen that one, and then
God.
the other one was his name was just in my head, and now I've forgotten it. He writes for Grassroots Motorsports. He drove the Volvo touring cars. What's
Randy
his name?
Post.
Randy Popes. Yeah, he was in a car one time and he kept saying, "No, we're on a racetrack," which is funny. But with that being said, I know. Those guys, the Studio RSR guys, were out at Laguna, and they had the car out there, which. They initially were running in Street GT, but then they had to get bumped out because the car was running. So they have the like full GT4 aero kit on that car that comes on the race car, but super good looking car, and that thing is definitely quick. And I feel like this is just sort of what you have to deal with when you move to whatever the newest platform is. I mean, the guys had to deal, like I know Jackie Ding and some of those guys had to deal with this with the Supras when they first started tracking them, is you've got to kind of figure out all the weird quirks, and especially with the G87s, I'm not sure exactly where they stand today in terms of us talking, but there were points, and I know Jackie did this. I know other people with M2s and M4s have had to do this. Of you either have to take your DME, your ECU, out of the car and ship it to somewhere like in the Netherlands or Finland or something like that, for them to basically unlock it, and then they ship it back to you. Or I think what some of the guys were doing is buying a new DME for their car, having that one shipped out, but you're still in this situation of, right, like the car's only like a year or two old. It's not like they have a bunch of extra DMEs just sitting around, right? Like you've got to kind of figure out like, oh, hey, like where can I get one? But all that to be said, I say all that because I've been going back and forth in my head of, I've got the older generation M4. I mean, it's quick, right? But like the ceiling of this new generation is much higher than the ceiling, the potential of my car. and I keep kind of going back and forth of like, I could go to the new car if I wanted to be, but the problem is that if I go to a new car next year, I'm going to be slower than I am this year because that car still has a bunch of development that it needs to go through.
Yeah, and as we talked about before, sometimes being on that front edge of that development curve is not fun.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're right, and you find out that your windows roll up when you hit the brakes hard, right? Like that's tough. But just crazy.
Yes. So Johnny Hernandez in his Honda Civic Type R, he ran a 154. Another really cool guy that I've known for a long time. Again, that was like a shakedown. This was a shakedown for Johnny.
Dude, I want to give a big shout out. Jeffrey Ting and Johnny Hernandez, both in the Honda Civic Type Rs. Like those do a 154 for Johnny Hernandez, ultimately 7th place, which is crazy that you're running that deep into the 150s and you're in 7th place. Just a super stacked field for street.
Well, and keep in mind, Jeffrey Ting, he just came out of Enthusiast, right? So he set the record in Enthusiast in a 153.9, so almost a 154. He brought that down to a 152.3, and the current record is a 150.6. Talking with Jeff, right, one thing, I think Jeff underestimated what it was going to take to get that record. And through talking with him, I think after that first day, he went, oh, this is going to be harder than I initially anticipated.
Sure.
So, kind of cool. But just talking to him about that.
Yeah. Just super impressive. Those Honda Civic Type Rs are fast. People are really starting to dial those in. And a 152.3 in those cars is just like very impressive to me. Super impressive. A lot of respect to both Jeffrey and Johnny for being that low in the 150s. So congrats to them.
And I'm not going to belabor because we're going to get the boss racing man himself, Mike Reyes, on the show here very, very soon. And we're going to chat him up. He's going to give us all the information about this event, about previous events, and about where he's going. So he'll be on the next episode coming into with us. But so we won't give him too much. But like I said, I talked to him a little bit during the event. Overall, he impresses me. And if you guys aren't watching his social media, you're just downright crazy. So let's jump into limited class here. So I'm gonna first say this. I'm just gonna say this. I completely and utterly apologize to Clayton Yates. I definitely completely overlooked Clayton in our precursor to this event, and he made me pay for this. So
that's
awesome. A 144.683 from Clayton Yates and his Corvette. Man, quick.
That's quick. That is very quick. Great job from him. Corvette. It's a C7 Z06, I believe. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it's not the new. It's the good-looking version of the one before. I talked to him a lot last year at Superlop, actually. At Finals. I talked to him at Finals last year quite a bit. And I don't know why the name just didn't click in my head when I saw the picture of his car. It just didn't click. But man, he was out there. He was absolutely crushing it. He's one of those people. So we talked about how there was only one record broken from Feras Qartoumy, but this guy was ridiculously close to this record. Feras Qartoumy's limited class record is a 144.2, and Clayton ran a 144.6. So he was on the cusp. He was right there. He did obviously win limited class, but he was on that cusp. I think without a doubt he's going to come out next year. He'll swing for the fences, and he'll be able to break that record. Now the question is there going to be anybody else coming up behind him that are going to be looking to break that record before or break the record on top of his breaking the record? It was limited class was stacked this year. I will absolutely give it to limited class because I have been saying for the last 2 or 3 years how if you wanted to go win in a time attack event, go to limited class. Because limited class had been so weak in the last few years. It
Agreed.
had just been overwhelmingly weak. And guys like Clayton Yates, Tim Shepner, George Zhao, Yingji Pan, Damian Tushiniski. Obviously, you have a couple of the other guys with the McLarens and so on and so forth. Ben Dankers. And even I'm going to give a big shout out to Brian here. He told me how to say his name at the event, and I cannot say it still. So, Cass and High or something like that. You're going to be called Brian Cass in my book. But
I like that.
You know, that guy ran a 149, right? So you're talking a 144 to a 149 in the top 9 places. Sub 50. So again, when we're talking about where do you need to be at to be competitive at finals, at GTA, at Buttonwillow, limited class, you must be sub 50, and I would probably even dare to say that realistically you need to be more so in the sub 1, probably 148 to 145 to be in the top.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's fast. So, the one thing that's upsetting to me, Damien, we talked to him prior, right? And we know this is his, I'm going to air quote this for everybody. This is his quote unquote practice car.
Mm-hmm.
Practice car running a
that's a quick practice car.
148.1. That is amazing from Damien. I definitely did not see him running that fast in that car, and seeing him on his YouTube that he's posting here recently didn't seem like he was expecting to go that fast either. So,
no, not at all. Yeah, it was cool because he's with Renner Racing. You can, if you look up his name or Renner Racing on YouTube, you can find the channel. But he was saying, right, like, not really sure what to expect. First kind of goal is ultimately to kind of get under the 150, right, which we've obviously been talking about. The sub 2 club was cool 10 years ago. Now it needs to be the sub 50 club, which is just crazy. But I feel like you could kind of see that he was pretty excited that they were able to run not just a sub 50, but a 48.1, and he even thought that there's a 47, maybe even a 46 if everything was perfect. But you could easily imagine being 3 seconds under your goal is always a good weekend. I'll take that anytime.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's really interesting to me, at least, with all the guys on the list. So I love seeing Tim Shepner up there with a 146 with this Mitsubishi. I love seeing, the glory days in that sense, right, of Subarus, Mitsubishis, all those things. I love seeing those guys come out and be able to do that. A little bit of a disappointment, I will say, from George Zhao. And I say that because George Zhao ran last year, and he ran a 146.9. And this year, he ran a 146.7. So he did improve, but only by 0.2. And I definitely saw Zhao as his opportunity was there to take the overall class win. My opinion was he was one of the guys that was going to do that.
Yep.
So
sure.
I was a little disappointed that he wasn't further up the order. I don't know if he had any struggles with that car or not. I know he's been working on it. He put a cool Marlboro livery on it. He's kind of got that Asian, I actually smoke cigarettes thing going on with him. But it's a cool setup that he's got in that car. The car's great. George is a great guy. He's always got a smile on his face. He's always having a good time. But I'd be curious to talk to George and understand, like, did they face any adversity there? Because I had an anticipation that he'd be more into the 45s at a minimum.
Sure.
But it's hard. It's not an easy track. It's not an easy event. Again, David Hogsma ended up competing in limited class. He, from what I understand, stole Will's Porsche and did some laps in it. It wasn't anticipating having that car on track, from what I understand. But at least Dave was able to go out there and have a good time and run some sweet lap times. And they finished out with a 148, a McLaren 720S. So we had this conversation before about, are things like McLaren's time attack cars. And I will say, an event like this kind of warms my heart a little bit. Kind of warms my heart when you get like the Evos, and I know Zhao's is an Audi R8, but you get an Audi R8 that's very time of test bit done, right? You get Damien, you get those guys, you know, even the Chevy Corvette up on top. I like it. I like seeing the time attack guys come out on top and seeing them doing their thing. And I will say this, if you look at limited class, I essentially kind of see like 2 tiers. And essentially tier 1 is 1st through 9th. Tier 2 is 10th through 16th. And I'm not saying if you're in the 10th through 16th that's a bad thing. You know, my guy James Howe.
No, because you're still under 150, you know.
Well, it's still crazy. You know, all these guys are doing an amazing job. I will say this: the guy at the bottom of the list here, Dominic Welch. Feel bad for this guy, but at the same time, he embodied that time attack spirit. So, from what I understand, like I heard it, I audibly heard it. He came around sunset, something happened, spun and hit his Miata into the wall.
Ugh.
But this guy was able
sucks.
to go back into his pits and still get this car back running and go back on track.
That's awesome.
So great to see
Good for him.
embody that spirit and get out there and do that thing. But man, that was it didn't sound good. Like I was definitely expecting that car to be way more messed up than it was, and it was rough. Couple of shout outs here. So Oscar Jackson in his FRS, pretty cool car, looks great. And Jonathan Lugod in his Honda Del Sol, which actually got to talking to him a little bit more at the event. Well, I should say I was sitting there taking all his advice and trying to steal all the data I possibly could out of his big old brain, which, again, this is somebody that I hope to have on the show to help all of us understand how things like shocks and suspension and that kind of stuff works, and you know how differentials turn and do things. You know, there's just people that are way smarter than myself for sure, that can come on the show and give you guys some education. So, but those guys came out, they ran some really quick lap times, a 152 in a FRS and a 153 in a Honda Del Sol. So it's cool to see, you know, old school, like cool cars that just guys are having fun in, doing the thing. And then we get to Unlimited, which now apparently the rule of thumb in Unlimited is, well, you got to be for sure sub 45. Sub 45 is
For sure.
is the number you got to be. And
that's just to be in the conversation, right? Like
Agreed.
that, and that is right. Like no guarantee of even being on the podium. I mean, but that's just going to get you close-ish, maybe.
Yeah, I think what we see here, right? The reality is 143. You had to be a 143 or faster to get on the podium. And I'm going to give so many props to this guy right now. So I can't say his last name at all, but Ryan Ratchechel, or whatever the hell your last name is, Ryan. You're driving.
I always just let you do that. You know what? Like you just keep going. You just keep going, Jager.
So Ryan is out there in an NA frickin' Miata with no ABS, no traction control. He's got like a 5-inch splitter. He's got a wing on the back, you know, whatever wing.
Wait, run that back for me. You said like no turbo, no supercharger, no.
Now it does have a V8 in it though.
Okay,
make sure you understand. It does have a roaring V8.
It's at least an engine swap.
Yeah, it does have an engine swap. But this guy just did a 143.0, and I know this record means absolutely dick. This thing means nothing. But it is now the Miata overall lap record of Buttonwillow.
That's awesome.
And he actually knew who held the previous lap record. So it makes it actually semi-okay for him to claim and say out loud. He actually knew what the record was prior, and he actually knew what a number that he had to beat.
That's awesome.
143.0. That's crazy fast for people that don't understand that. I guarantee you could go back in the last 10 years, and that time would probably win you the entire event.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Just astonishing to have a Miata out there running that lap time. Then I'll kind of poke the bear a little bit and go complete antithesis of that. Craig Coker in his Tesla Plaid, who won last year, he came out and did this year and did a 143.7, and he ended up in third place. Now, big negative for Craig was last year he did a 143.25. So Craig, you're going backwards, son. We gotta get you moving into the future. I thought you were the future guy here. Come on, my man.
His batteries must be he must need new batteries.
Well, I will say this. So I've talked to Craig a lot over the years, and this is where Time Attack and Teslas, not Teslas, but just electric cars in general, it's so difficult. And eventually I want to get Craig on the show as well, and because I want him to explain in depth, when you're talking about campaigning a car like this, all's it took, and this is, no spears at anybody, but I think it was Tim Shepner was going down and spun his Evo, and it turned into a situation where, like, understand, Craig goes out, he does a warm-up lap, he does a hot lap, and then he's, like, into the pits, right?
Yep.
So if on his hot lap,
because you have no more performance, right? Like
it'll drop down to 40% power or something like that, right? Like it's going to take away power, or it's going to do, it's going to overheat the batteries, or it's going to, something's going to happen, and it makes it so he can't lay down the fastest lap possible. So again, for someone like Craig, like it really is a situation where, you need every last, like, perfect hot lap to be perfect, which also means he only gets to accomplish like 6 or 7 hot laps over the entirety of the weekend.
Yeah, that's so tough. Gosh, it's tough.
It is.
Which, I mean, you see the guys out there, they will stay out there just to get more laps in, but right, imagine you're out there in your car and you run your first lap and you've got 500 horsepower, and then for your next 3 laps you've got 300 horsepower, right? Like,
it's just not quite
it's just not quite the same, right? Even though you're out there, you're getting more laps in, it's just not quite the same. And I feel like your braking markers are kind of, changing periodically. It's real tough. And I also I think I was watching the Evasive Motorsports video, and I'll see if you know. It looks like that the Tesla superchargers are not all that close. It's not like that they are, like, in the paddock, at least from what I could tell. It looks like you kind of have to go get your car and then drive it back into the track.
So the way that Buttonwillow built, so there's a couple different ways. So Craig was telling me he used to use the 50 amp out of a RV spot, but they did put Tesla superchargers in at the new Buttonwillow track. So to get to the new Buttonwillow track, you do have to. It's not like a far drive, honestly. It's like it's probably like a 3-minute drive. But yeah, that, like me and Craig talked about that. And it's okay. So when you, as a ICE car, pull in, you shut your car off, you pull the data out of your car, you start reviewing data, you start reviewing video, right? You start talking to your team. When Craig gets done with his lap, it's an immediate, hey guys, I'm driving to the supercharger, I got to plug this in. Hey, can someone come pick me up? And then if you wanted the data out of the car, then you're either going to have to grab the, AIM or whatever out, or you're going to bring a laptop to the car to pull the data off the car and then bring it back to the pits. And then, oh yeah, by the way, let's look at when the next session's going to be to make sure that we drive there, get the car, drive back, put it on grid. It makes it much more of a logistical and a planning problematic situation that makes it really hard. A lot of people can say, and Craig will say himself, he doesn't have a lot of mechanical problems with the car. So big benefit, because if you did have that, you'd be super screwed. But there's the logistical challenges and the planning challenges that go into this that make this very, very, very difficult. I will say to Craig, he was leading the leaderboards for the better half, I think, of the first day. So big props to him. That is always a awesome show that he always puts on. Does a great job. Again, Christian Wong and Project Import came out. They did a 147. They had to basically, they had more lap time in. Let's just say that they were going on a good pace, but a little bolt started coming loose on the engine, and it looked like it bent a little bit. So they were smart, and they just said, we're done, and they can go back, recoup, and get that engine back to 100% really quickly. So good on them for catching that and making sure they identified that really early and not causing catastrophic failures, so on and so forth. A big shout out to this guy, though, Maxwell Livioski. So this poor guy, man, I saw him fly off of Riverside, long right-hand sweeping corner, takes his whole front end of his car off. Splitter was attached to the bumper, all that stuff, right? So it just rips off the bumper. It looked like it ripped off oil coolers, all these things. It was rough. And then on the flip side of that, so he goes and repairs it, gets it all situated, and after he gets it all situated, I think he went out again, and because of all the oil over the tires and all the other stuff, I think it ended up in a situation where he went off again and ripped off it again, and he was working hard. Again, he was putting in that time attack effort. He was really working really hard. I think this guy had way more lap time in him, but with all the things that were going on and really killing his front downforce and so on and so forth, I think he could have easily been. There's a good picture of exactly what we're talking about. It was not a good day. You can see there the bumper's halfway ripped off. He's got oil leaking or coolant leaking out the car. It was just a mess, and the poor guy obviously is covered in dirt.
Yeah. It's a cool looking, so it's a BMW E36. He's got it listed as a 328 IS, but he's got some fat tires on there. He's got a wide body kit. It is a pretty mean looking car. I don't know. I can't really see. It looks, I'm going to go out on a limb here. It looks like an S54 engine based on the picture we currently have. Maybe, I don't know if that's it. Well, that's another S54, but yeah, super cool looking car, really really slick. And that so the S54 E36 combination is very popular. The S54 came in the next generation, so the E46. They run like 333 horsepower stock. But that's the same combination that
Bailey,
that our buddy Bailey Woods runs. So obviously it can be very potent. You can get a lot of weight out of the E36 chassis, and then you can have a 350 horsepower engine. So really good looking car. I hate to see that he had such a rough weekend.
Yeah, he had a struggle weekend, that's for sure. And then we had a couple of Mustangs from MMR. So those guys showed up. Mark Lutton, a lot of Mustang guys are drooling over that car. Car sounds amazing. It looks great on track. He was able to rope out a 148 out of that car. And Taylor has a much more stock-looking car, I'd say. I'd be interested to understand what really pushed him into Unlimited class. And it could have just been tire choice, to be honest with you.
Sure.
But Taylor ran a 156. A big shout out to Kevin Phillips. He brought up that Chevy S10 again, running a 150. He was really trying to push to get that thing under that 150 mark. Truck's really cool, really awesome.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say he probably has, I don't know, the Chevy S10 record at almost every track that he goes to. I mean, you could at least say that.
I can guarantee it. I can absolutely guarantee it. So, yeah, and that's rounding out our all our competitors there, and it was a great event. I will say this, I love Time Attack to death. and I just want to see it continue to improve and grow. And the guys that are showing up, guys and gals, incredibly fast. And, like we're talking about, kind of the whole point of what we're talking about is there was 18 competitors in the sub 50 category. So as Kilgore was talking about earlier, the sub 2,
that's just street class. Just street class, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's I think that's overall out of everybody. Out of all competitors, they were all sub 50. In street class, we had 18 sub 2. Yeah. But, I mean, but that just
sub
shows
50,
you.
Sub 2.
Yeah, that just shows you, though, like, where we're at in time attack at Buttonwillow. And, again, I use this as kind of a metric, and I say that because this is the 20th year of finals. We've had 20 years. So when we're talking 10 years ago, if you ran sub 2, you were one of the fastest guys on the planet. And now if you're running sub 50, you're a fast guy, but you must be running sub 40 to be called the fastest guy. Yeah. And with that,
it's crazy.
What else do you got for us there, Kilgore? What are your thoughts?
I'll say again, it sucks that such a prestigious event wasn't able to be broadcast, on or streamed. That's unfortunate. Just didn't quite come together. I definitely missed out because this is an event that I really look forward to. I look forward to kind of seeing the cars and just seeing the times. But clearly, everyone is continuing to push. We kind of go. We've sort of talked, multiple times. Kind of, what are our expectations for how many records should fall every year? I don't know. I'm not really sure where I stand. It's interesting this year. It's just an interesting fact that we only saw one record fall, and it was by 0.05 seconds, right? Like 0.05 of a second by Feras. Nobody else was able to take a record.
Couple of close. But
yeah. People are knocking on the door, but Will Al Young's overall record, as you said, is going to stand for another year. Everybody's record, except for Ferris's now, has stood for another year. So that makes me interested to see, okay, like where are we going to fall next year? What are people going to be doing? Where are people, what are people going to be building? Where are we going to fall next year? And that's to me just sort of what I look forward to. After we saw this year, we've said clearly everybody is getting faster. You have so many cars now sub 50. It's almost expected. I mean, I think maybe only a handful of cars were over 2 minutes, and some of those were having mechanical issues, right? So it's not really quite a representative time. But I mean, now basically most everyone is running sub 50, sub 2 minutes. Some even sub 50, right? Like everyone is clearly getting faster. Where are we going to end up with these records? I think it's just something to watch over the next couple years and to see who does it and how they do it. I'm really interested to see how that works out.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see if next year we can get some more records falling. And Guess what, guys? It's the end of the time attack season.
Man.
That's it. We're done. And let's see some new builds. And what you guys have to expect from us is, well, we're going to start talking to some of these guys. We're going to start talking to some people in the industry. We're going to start trying to give you guys some advice, trying to help you guys out, let you tell your stories, and let's see where we can take it. Let's see if we can, keep you guys interested and still enjoy time attack in the off season, even though in California it's like 70 degrees and I can go out and time attack all I want.
That's right. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, for the majority of the U.S., the winter time is off season. You Southern California dudes, like wintertime is your main peak season and the summertime is your off season.
That's for true. Sure. Because let me tell you, Buttonwillow at 112 is probably about as enjoyable as, Michigan in the middle of winter when it's snowing. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're going to be having, we're already starting to see some information come out from organizations in terms of schedule for next year.
Rules.
Rules are going to be coming out. We're definitely going to be hitting on those things. We will definitely keep you guys up to date as best we can as we hear things. With that being said, Super Lap Battle has been announced for next year. It is going to be April. I think it's, I'm going to say all this and then I'm going to get the date wrong, but I think it's April 11th and 12th. So it's a little bit later than normal because last year I think it was in March, maybe early March. But they've pushed that date back a little bit. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know exactly why, but yeah. So no. So let me correct that.
Just looking to optimize the date, just to to get it deconflicted with other events, as well as make sure the weather is the perfect opportunity to give people that option. So
yeah. I think it's April 12th and 13th. Yeah, April 12th and 13th. So I think registration may have already opened for that. I know that they're going to give everybody plenty of time to get registered. So definitely check that out. And then again, PRI is in like less than a month or right at about a month. I know at PRI that is usually when Grid Life announces their event schedule. So I think we should expect maybe that event schedule to be coming out then. So we'll, once the Grid Life Time Attack calendar is out, we'll let you guys know about that. SCCA has already released some events as well. They are moving. If you don't know, if you haven't heard us talk about it, they are moving their time trial, their big year-end event, Time Trial Nationals, from NCM. It is going to be at Pit Race, and it will still be in October. So that will be a bit of a change. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I'm excited. I've already started thinking about, okay, what am I going to be doing next year? What changes do I need? What modifications do I want to do? Who's having Black Friday sales? So who can, what stuff can I pick up cheap, or on sale now? So I'm sure you guys are also doing that. So we would love to hear from you. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure and leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys are going to be doing over the winter. Let us know if there's any topics you would like us to hit on over the winter. If you want to email us, you can email us at maximumattack@perfectlappodcast.com. That is maximumattack@perfeclappodcast.com. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you guys. But otherwise, hope everyone's having a good time. We're going to get Mike Reyes on here soon to talk about his time at Global Time Attack Finals. But otherwise, we're looking forward to seeing your new builds out there. Keep searching for that perfect lap. Have a good one.